Hey everybody, thanks again for joining us for Home Groups. My name's Nick, and I am super excited to be continuing our Bad Blood series. Just to catch everybody up on what we're doing, it is a 4-week series that we are walking through. We've already talked about siblings, we've talked about friendships. Today we're going to be talking about boyfriends and girlfriends, and then next week we will wrap up talking about our relationship with Jesus. Now, as we look at each of these topics, these relationships, we recognize these aren't the only relationships we have, but these are 4 of the most important ones that we do. And as we look at these, we always want to look at what the Bible tells us about relationships. So we're looking at 4 examples in the Bible. And the 4 examples we looked at Cain and Abel. We looked at loyalty and friendship as we talked about Peter and Jesus. Today we're going to talk about David and one of his wives, Michal. And then next week we're going to look at different passages that have to do with our relationship with Jesus as a whole. Now, a lot of these relationships that we've looked at, like Cain and Abel, Peter and Jesus, David and Michal, they're not great relationships all the time. And what we want to do is we want to look at these relationships and say, okay, like, what can we learn from a relationship in the Bible that maybe didn't go the way it was supposed to? And how can we then take the necessary steps to make sure our relationships that we have are God-honoring and God-centered? And I just want to give you a heads up. Like today, as we talk about dating, as we talk about boyfriends and girlfriends, I'm not going to sit here and give you my insight on what dating is. I could tell you all of my personal opinions and preferences and how you should or shouldn't date. It's not what I'm looking to do. I recognize that every one of us, we come from a family background where there are different rules and guidelines that our family has put in place, and we want to honor those. What I want to do today is give us a biblical framework for dating well and what healthy dating relationships should look like. And what I want to do is look at a relationship with David and Michal and say, okay, let's look at their relationship and realize what can we apply practically from that story to our lives as it concerns our dating relationships. So a little bit of background before we get into the story, all right? Let's just kind of set the stage. So David was to become the new king of Israel. He's in this kind of transitional period. Saul, who is Michal's dad, so it's a little bit awkward there. David is moving in. God has destined him to be the new king. He has been anointed by Samuel. He's getting ready to take the throne, but Saul's still in power. And so it's kind of like this weird tension period between the two. But what we see is that David eventually, he marries Saul's daughter, Michal. But he does this for political positioning. Both Saul and David realized that this was a good political move. And we even hear about that in our culture today. Different kings and queens or rulers intermarry because it's politically advantageous. And so that's what David does. It wasn't necessarily for love. We do see a little bit of that, but that wasn't the focus. It wasn't like the main thrust to why they got married. It was for a political position. And so we also see then that this relationship, this marriage, is actually built upon a crazy deal. Saul had originally offered David his older daughter, but David didn't find any sort of like connection with her. And so he says, I'll marry Michal. And Saul goes, great, but in order for you to do this, you need to go out and kill 200 Philistines and bring me back proof. I'm just going to say this first and foremost. Like if somebody says, in order for you to date my son or daughter or to marry my son or daughter, you have to go do X, like you have to meet this crazy deal, that is a bad sign to begin with. Like do not get into that relationship. That is not going to be healthy going forward. But what we also realize about them, if you go into 1 Samuel, we're going to be in 2 Samuel tonight, but if you go into 1 Samuel, chapters 17 and following, you will see that both David and Michal, like their hearts weren't aligned with God in the same way. There's actually a point in their relationship where David is being pursued by Saul, and Michal's like, quick, run away, and she has him escape out the back door, right? And what she does is she takes an idol and she puts it in the bed, she puts some fake hair on it and tries to get her dad, Saul, to think that the idol in the bed with the fake hair is David. And we're like, well, that's humorous and dumb. Like, obviously that didn't work. But like, why did she have an idol to begin with? David was called a man after God's own heart. But Michal, she had an idol in their house. And so we see like there was already this disconnect between how they looked at God, how they valued their relationship with God. And so today I want to look at a passage that we actually talked through on Sunday. If you did our study for the Love This Book series that we're doing on Sunday, I know a bunch of you guys couldn't make it due to weather and other commitments this past Sunday. But we're going to be in 2 Samuel chapter 6, and we looked at how David worshiped there. But part of the stuff that we didn't look at, specifically in core, is we didn't look at how Michal, his wife, received what he did and how that affected their relationship. And so I want to take a look at that today. So we're only going to be in about maybe 6 to 8 verses tonight. We'll take a quick look at it and then say, okay, what do we learn from this? So check this out. 2 Samuel 6, beginning in verse 12. So King David was told, the Lord has blessed the household of Obed-Edom and everything he has because of the Ark of God. That's the Ark of the Covenant. And so David went to bring up the Ark of God from the house of Obed-Edom to the city of David with rejoicing. When those who were carrying the Ark of the Lord had taken 6 steps, David sacrificed a bull and a fattened calf. He was wearing a linen ephod, and David was dancing before the Lord with all his might, while he and all Israel were bringing up the Ark of the Lord with shouts and sound of trumpets. As the Ark of the Lord was entering the city of David, Michal, daughter of Saul, watched from a window. And when she saw King David leaping and dancing before the Lord, she despised him in her heart. So here's what's going on, just to kind of set the stage. David is bringing back the Ark of the Covenant, right? If you've seen Indiana Jones, you know what I'm talking about, right? It's this beautiful gold ark with 2 cherubim on either side. And we're told that in Israel's time period, God dwelt there. And so it was really important to bring this back. And David is pumped. He's super excited. He's worshiping God. He's just letting loose. He's dancing. There's music. There's trumpets and singing. It's awesome. People were just worshiping God fully. Then we're told that Michal looks out a window. Like, notice she's not down there worshiping God. She's not with the rest of Israel. We're told she looks out from afar, and she despised him. That's strong language for a husband and wife, for a wife to despise her husband. She was so filled with contempt because to her, image was everything. And David was making a fool of himself in her eyes. She was like, we are royalty. You shouldn't be doing that. You shouldn't be worshiping God like that. You're making yourself a fool. In fact, check out what happens just a few verses later, beginning in verse 20. David returns home to bless his household, and Michal, daughter of Saul, came out to meet him and said, how the king of Israel has distinguished himself today, going around half naked in full view of the slave girls of his servants, as any vulgar fellow would. David said to Michal, it was before the Lord who chose me rather than your father or anyone from his house when he appointed me ruler over the Lord's people Israel. I will celebrate before the Lord. I will become even more undignified than this, and I will be humiliated in my own eyes. But by these slave girls you spoke of, I will be held in honor. I mean, can you picture in your mind's eye like how this conversation went? Like, can you just see like Michal coming out of the house and like what she says here? How the king of Israel has distinguished himself today. Like the sarcasm that's just dripping from her voice. Like just like the disgust as she looks at David. She's like, you made a fool of yourself. You're disgusting. And then David's response, like, man, you want to talk about like coming right back with like a right hook in this argument. He goes, God chose me, not your dad or anybody else from your family. It's like, ooh, shots fired, right? I mean, this is just a problem. I mean, they're going at each other, but it's clear that for them, they have 2 differing opinions within their hearts that are played out in their lives. And you just see this tension developing. It's really problematic. And so from these couple of verses, I want to say, okay, what can we learn about a healthy dating relationship? Like, what's it look like? And I think first is like, we just need to realize that a healthy dating relationship will honor God and not be ashamed of him. Like, we just need to call that out. Like, David was all about worshiping God. He's partying with his people because God has come back to where he needs to be with the people of Israel. And David just couldn't contain his joy, his worship of God. And like a healthy dating relationship will be one that honors God, that we aren't ashamed of God in. Like, we're not hiding that we're Christians. We're not hiding that we go to church. We're not ashamed that we worship God at camp or on Sunday mornings. Like, we need to understand that like a good, healthy dating relationship will honor God. God will be at the center of that relationship in everything we do. But take it a step further. Because we honor God, we now honor one another in that dating relationship. We then look at one another. We go, okay, boyfriend, girlfriend, like, because I honor God, because I worship God, God tells me that he is love and I should love others as I love him. Therefore, I should be loving and holding that person in the place of honor and respect. I should be caring for them. I shouldn't treat them poorly. I shouldn't criticize them. I shouldn't yell at them or be sarcastic. I should look to uplift them and honor them as God is honored in this relationship. And I think we see that kind of played out a little bit here in David's relationship with Michal, but not in a healthy way. They don't honor each other. They both don't honor God. I mean, David, we're told, is a man after God's own heart. He comes in after worshiping God. But like when Michal is critical towards him, he could have taken a different posture. But David instead goes, God didn't choose your family. And he gets aggressive and antagonistic. It's like, well, David, chill out. You just worship God, my man. Your heart should be in a better place. But you see, a healthy dating relationship, one that is built with God as its center, means that we will honor God and honor others. And that works its way out through how we speak to each other. When we talk to one another, like when we're in a relationship, we should use genuine and love-filled language. And some of you guys are in relationships right now where maybe the other person is sarcastic, or maybe you're sarcastic, or maybe that person like breaks you down a lot, or maybe they speak poorly to you, but then they're like, oh, I'm so sorry, forgive me. Man, if somebody keeps doing that to you, that is not a good relationship to be in. It is not healthy to be in a relationship where somebody's critical, sarcastic, angry, mean, or downright derogatory to you. That type of stuff is not a characteristic of a healthy dating relationship. And we see that with David and Michael. We can clearly look at their relationship from the outside looking in and go, that's bad because of how they're talking to each other. Our language should be genuine and love-filled. Now, that doesn't mean we don't speak truth. It means we speak that truth in love. We honor one another as we seek to help each other grow. But that also means then that from a relational perspective, as this is being worked out in our lives, that we don't allow for anger, for tension, selfishness, or frustration to continue. We're not saying those emotions never happen. There will be moments of frustration or tenseness or selfishness within a relationship. We are broken people. But those shouldn't be habitual things we do. They shouldn't continue to happen. And when they do, we should work to make sure they don't continue. We should work to work healthy rhythms into our relationships rather than allowing for unhealthy rhythms to take hold. And so we need to be working towards a God-centered relationship that both honors God and others. And so our language needs to be like uplifting and genuine and filled with love. And we don't want to allow for these negative emotions or characteristics to work themselves into our relationship. Also, a healthy relationship should never pull you away from God. Ever. A healthy relationship should pull you closer to God, because if God is the center, everything should be pulling us to God. And if you find that you're in a relationship right now that maybe you're not getting close to God, in fact, maybe it's pulling you away from God, maybe you're not coming to church as often, maybe you're shutting down and talking with your small group, maybe you realize like there's things within this relationship that aren't God honoring, but you've become okay with it, I'm just gonna be very direct with you. If that's where you find yourself, that is not a healthy relationship to be in. No relationship should pull you away from your first love, and our first love is God. And if you find yourself in that relationship, man, let me encourage you to take a step back and take a real honest, authentic look at that relationship and say, should I be in this? Maybe bring in somebody from an outside perspective, another believer, maybe it's your small group leader, your small group, whomever, somebody you trust, and say, hey, is this healthy? Should I be in this? And sometimes you just need somebody to speak truth and let you know that. And we also need to realize then that a healthy dating relationship is born out of true love for God and the other person. Again, with God being the center, a desire for a healthy relationship is born out of our love for God, because we see how much God loves us and we just can't contain that love, and we want to spread that love, and God has designed us to be in relationships. And so we know that any relationship that we are in, especially in a dating relationship, it should be God honoring and God centered. And so we're looking to love God as we love that person. God has to be the center. So what does this mean then? Like, this is all great, like the kind of framework for what a healthy dating relationship should look like. But like, what is some actual advice I would give to you? Well, I'm just gonna give you straight up biblical advice. First, wait to date until you know what you're looking for and you're ready for marriage. Let me just say this real quick. Some of you, myself included when I was in high school, just rushed into dating relationships because we wanted it. But I would assert to you, we're not all ready for it. And we see that throughout the Bible. You see people who they didn't know what they were looking for, and they just kind of went and they got married, or they just like started hooking up with a girl or a guy, and it just did not end well. I mean, David's a great example. Fast forward a few chapters, and you see Bathsheba and him, not good. He was not going to marry her to begin with. He just wanted what he wanted. He wanted to fill his heart full of lust, and he saw Bathsheba, and he was about to run into it, and that's not healthy. A healthy relationship is waiting to date the right person, the person that you know, hey, potentially I could spend my life with this person. Like, dating isn't about just being with somebody. Dating it should be intentional with us, like looking towards marriage and going, I could spend my life with this person. This is somebody who I see God in, and because of that, I want to honor them as I honor God, and so I want this to be a relationship that points us to God holistically. So let me encourage you to consider waiting. It's not a bad thing. Wait and date with intentionality. Also, date people who follow Jesus. I can't express this enough. If you date people who don't follow Jesus, that will pull you away from Jesus. You want somebody who's going to push you towards Jesus. That is what our heart should be centered on, is Jesus first. And sometimes we put relationships first, and that's not healthy. We need to put Jesus first and date people who are going to push us to Jesus, who challenge us to be like a more like dedicated follower to Jesus. So let me encourage you to date people who follow Jesus. And we see this, like we see problems in Scripture when people don't get into relationships with people who follow Jesus. It just destroys them. Samson and Delilah is a great example of this. Delilah did not follow Jesus, did not follow God, and it destroyed Samson. Like follow or date people who follow God. Also find somebody then who is as passionate about God as you are. There are people who have the same heart, the same passion for Jesus you do. So find somebody who does that. Don't just date somebody who follows Jesus. Find somebody who's going to complement your passion and your desire for Jesus as well. Also, don't date for positioning or value. Let me kind of unpack this a little bit. Don't date somebody to be popular, and don't find your self-worth in your dating relationship. People can never give you worth. Only God gives you worth. And if you're dating somebody because they're popular and you want to be a part of that group, that is not a great way to enter into a relationship. You should enter a relationship because that person loves Jesus and they love you. That's why you should enter into a relationship. You enter a relationship because that person honors Jesus and they honor you. You shouldn't look to date for popularity or to find your value there. If that's what you're in, man, you're going to constantly be disappointed because people are broken. Every one of us. And if you build your framework for a relationship around a person, you are building a framework that is shaky and wobbly. You need to build your framework around Jesus, which is a solid platform to keep you on and will allow for you to stand there for your relationship to flourish. And also understand that that life is a marathon, so you don't need to date or marry at the rate others are. Being single is okay. It really is. Elise and I didn't get married until we were much later than most of our friends when we got married. And that's okay. You don't need to date. You don't need to be in a relationship. You can be single, and that's okay. You can have a lot of great friendships, and that's worthy. That's something that's beneficial. So be content with where you are. Realize that God is not calling you to date and marry super fast. That maybe he's calling you to wait for that right person so that you can mature and be solidified in your relationship with him, and as such, have a healthy, God-centered relationship going forward. Life's a marathon, not a sprint. So as we kind of get ready to conclude tonight, I really want you guys to take some time in your groups to really talk through this. I know I've only scraped the surface of this. And my intent with this is for you guys to have good conversations around this. So maybe you could take some time to talk through some of these biblical examples. We have Ruth and Boaz, Adam and Eve, Mary, Joseph, David, Bathsheba. I mean, these are both good and bad examples, and that's okay. Or maybe you take some time and you're like, hey, as I have that slide twice apparently, but we take time to maybe go, hey, let's talk through some Bible passages about dating. We have Genesis, 1st and 2nd Corinthians, Matthew, Hebrews, 1 Thessalonians. These are passages that give us a framework for what a healthy relationship looks like. And there's also some additional resources, and your leaders have all this stuff too, because I know I don't have time to go through all of it. But they have these resources. You guys can talk through them, read through them. These are some great websites. I also have books and other helpful things in my office, and I'm available if you want to talk too. My hope with this is simple, guys, is that we date with intentionality. We date with a purpose. We date to honor God in our relationships, that he is the center. And that in those relationships, we seek to have healthy, God-honoring relationships with other people because we have a healthy, God-honoring relationship with God. So let me encourage you to date with intentionality, to be at peace wherever you're at, whether in a relationship or single. God uses both. But date people who love Jesus, who are pushing you towards Jesus. And date with a desire to grow closer to God together. Let me pray for you guys. Awesome God, thank you for the truth of your word. Help us to use that as a framework for how we engage in relationships, especially dating with other people, Father. Let us model this well. Let us date with intentionality and look to date people who reflect Jesus in their lives and push each of us towards you. May we be people who love you, serve you in all capacities, Father, in all aspects of our relationships. And we pray this in your name. Amen. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed the snow this week. Have a great week, and I'll see some of you guys on Sunday, hopefully. And I can't wait to see you guys then. Take care.